The cottage is a single room with a low ceiling of smoke-darkened beams. The hearth at the center holds the remains of last night's fire, a pale mound of ash with a few embers still breathing orange when you stir them with a stick. You add a handful of dry twigs and a split log no thicker than your wrist, blowing gently until a small flame catches. The light grows, nudging shadows into corners. You set a pot of water on the trivet. While it warms, you take down a loaf of coarse rye bread from the shelf, break off a piece the size of your fist and chew it slowly. The bread is dense and slightly sour, and you eat standing, looking through the one window whose oiled linen covering lets in the first watery hint of dawn. The day ahead holds nothing more complicated than the gathering of acorns. It is October of the year 1450, the Pannage season, when the Lord's swine are turned into the forest of Dean to fatten on mast. You are one of those who collect the fallen acorns for those pigs that cannot root freely, or to store against harder weeks. The work is simple, repetitive, and deeply familiar. You do not think about it so much as you prepare for it, the way a miller's hands prepare the hopper without the mind ever catching up. Your tools wait by the door, a basket woven from willow withies, its one cracked handle bound with a strip of leather, a large sack of coarse linen, empty now and folded, a wooden bushel measure, square-built and reinforced at the corners with iron nails, its interior marked by a notch for the correct level, a leather water skin, and a hazel tally stick, peel with a cross cut into the top end as your mark. You pick up the basket first, testing the handle, then fold the sack over your arm. The bushel measure you carry against your hip, its weight a comfortable burden. The water skin goes over your shoulder by its strap, and the tally stick is slipped into the loop on your belt. You are not hurried. There is time enough for every small motion, and you take them one by one. Outside the cottage door, the air is cool and damp, holding the fullness of an October morning that has not yet felt the sun. The sky is a smooth, pale grey, with a soft amber band along the eastern hills where the sun will rise. The ground near your threshold is bare and swept, but beyond, the path begins, a ribbon of packed earth winding between ferns gone brown at the edges. The first fallen leaves of the season lie scattered, oak leaves mostly, their lobes curling like old parchment. They give off a quiet, earthy smell, tannin-rich and faintly sweet. You step onto the path, and your footfall makes a small hush, the sound of dry leaf against damp soil. No birds sing yet, though a rook calls somewhere far off, a single rough note that does not repeat. You walk at an easy pace, the basket swinging slightly. The path descends gently toward the tree line, where the scattered oaks of the field margin give way to the dense stretch of the royal forest. To your left, a hedgerow of hawthorn and blackthorn shows its dark twigs, a few last sloes hanging wrinkled and blue. To your right, the ground slopes away into a small valley threaded with mist. The mist is low, white and still, lying in the hollows like water. You pass a fallen branch that you stepped over yesterday and will step over again today, its bark peeling back in grey strips. The path knows you, and you know it, every dip and turn, a memory held in the soles of your feet. As you enter the first trees, the light changes. The forest roof closes above you, a canopy of oak and beech still holding enough leaves to scatter the grey morning into shifting patches. Trunks rise on either side, their bark rough and grooved, hosting patches of pale green lichen and the dark velvet of moss. The ground under the trees is carpeted with leaf litter, a deep brown layer that gives slightly with each step. Here the smell of autumn deepens, a layered scent of wet earth, rotting wood, and the sharp, clean note of acorn tannin. You pause just inside the edge of the wood to let your eyes adjust, and in that pause you hear the soft patter of a single acorn falling somewhere to the right, striking a branch on its way down before the final cushion thud. The acorn fall has been good this year. You saw it beginning in late September, when the first green cups let go their glossy fruit. Now, in mid-October, the ground is plentiful. You scan the base of a nearby oak and see them, hundreds of acorns lying half hidden among the leaves, some still in their rough cups, most loose, their shells a range of browns from pale tan to deep mahogany. A few have been nibbled by wood mice, the shells split in neat diagonal cuts, but most are whole and sound. You kneel by the first tree, setting the bushel measure on a level patch of ground. The basket you place beside your right knee. Then you begin to gather. You work with both hands, fingers spreading to scoop up small clusters of acorns, shaking off the clinging leaf fragments before dropping them into the basket. Each acorn is smooth and cool, the pointed tip pressing lightly into your palm. You pick them one by one when they are scattered, or several at a time where they lie thick. The rhythm is unhurried. Reach, gather, drop. Reach, gather, drop. The sounds are small, the dry tick of acorn against acorn in the basket, the rustle of leaves as you disturb them, the soft creak of a branch somewhere above. You shift on your knees as the cleared patch widens, moving a little to the left, then forward, leaving behind a section of ground where the leaves lie undisturbed and all the acorns have vanished into your basket. When the basket is heavy enough to press against the weave, you rise and carry it to the bushel measure. You tip the basket slowly, letting the acorns pour out in a rattling stream. They fill the wooden box with a sound like rain on a tight cloth. You level the pile with your forearm, drawing it across the top so that the acorns sit flush with the rim, no more, no less. That is one full measure. You lift the bushel and empty it into the linen sack, holding the sack open with one hand and tilting the box with the other. The acorns slide in, and the sack now holds a small, lumpy weight at the bottom. You return to your knees and begin again, filling the basket, carrying, pouring, leveling. The forest around you stays quiet. Somewhere beyond the range of your vision, the Lord's swine are already at their own work. You have not seen them yet this morning, but you know they are there by the occasional distant grunt and the soft sound of heavy bodies pushing through undergrowth. The pigs are turned out for pannage from early October through late November, fattening on the mast before the winter slaughter. The swineherd will be with them, a boy of perhaps 14, carrying a crook and a horn. You saw him yesterday on the far side of the beach stand, half asleep against a log. Today you have not yet come upon him. It does not matter. The forest holds enough space for all of you, spread out under the endless oaks. Your tally stick waits in your belt, and once the bushel measure has been filled and emptied a second time, you pause to carve the first notch. You take out the small knife you carry in a sheath at your waist, a blade worn thin from use, and cut a neat V-shaped mark in the pale hazel wood. One notch means one bushel. Beside the notch you make a small cross-check, your own identifying mark, already familiar to the steward who will later count. The wood curls away under the blade, a tiny pale shaving that drifts to the ground. You tuck the tally stick back against your hip and wipe your hands on the front of your tunic. The light has grown a little stronger, though the sun is still below the treetops. The grey of the sky is now pearlescent, touched with pale yellow behind the branches. You can see more clearly the details of the tree under which you work, the deep vertical furrows of the bark, the bracket fungi protruding like small dark shelves, the way one large root runs above ground for several feet before dipping back into the leaf litter. A spider has strung a web between that root and a low twig, and it holds a string of tiny dew beads that tremble in no wind. You watch the web for a moment without thought, then return your eyes to the ground and continue gathering. The process repeats. You fill the basket slowly, letting the acorns gather in the hollow of your palm before they cascade into the weave. You notice the differences among them without consciously cataloguing, this one still wearing its cup like a close-fitting cap, that one shell a perfect unblemished brown, another with a tiny pinprick hole where an insect has entered. Those you discard, tossing them aside into the ferns. The good ones go into the basket, and the basket grows heavy, and you carry it to the measure, and you pour, and you level, and you tip into the sack. There is no need to count in your head. The measure does the counting for you, and the tally stick records it. After a while you stand and stretch your back, looking up through the lattice of oak branches. The leaves that remain are a green gold of the crown, shifting to yellow and brown lower down. Some are already bare. Against the brightening sky, the twigs make a fine dark net. You listen and hear, very far away, the sound of the swineherd's horn, a low breathy note that means the pigs are being moved to fresh ground. You cannot see them, but you can picture them. The great sow, with the bell at her neck leading the line. The younger pigs trotting behind, their snouts already testing the air for the scent of fallen mast. You take up your basket and move to another tree. This one younger and smaller, its trunk no thicker than your waist. The acorns here are smaller too, but just as plentiful. You kneel again, the leaf mold damp under your knees. The work continues. Basket, measure, sack. The second bushel fills more quickly than the first, or perhaps it only feels that way because your hands have found their rhythm. You level the measure, noting the way the top acorns shift and settle against one another, fitting their various shapes into a smooth surface. You empty it into the sack, which now bulges gently at the bottom when you lift it. The sack will hold many bushels before the day is through. You carve the second notch on the tally stick, and this time you pause to take a drink from the water skin. The water is cool and carries the faint metallic taste of the leather, a familiar flavor that quenches without calling attention to itself. You seal the skin, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and stand still for perhaps a dozen slow breaths, doing nothing but existing in the forest. The cool air moves against your cheek. Somewhere, a jay gives its harsh call, then falls silent. A leaf detaches from a branch above and spirals down, a slow wobbling descent that lands soundlessly on the sack. You do not brush it away. The morning has unfolded without event, and it will continue to do so. You pick up the basket and move deeper into the wood, following a faint track that winds between holly bushes, their leaves dark and glossy. The track leads to a stand of beech where the mast is different, small triangular nuts in prickly husks, less favored than acorns but still gathered when found. You pick a handful, brushing away the spiny casing, and add them to the basket. The mix will do no harm. The pigs are not particular when it comes to mast, and the steward counts beech nuts as half the value of acorns, which you will note on the tally stick by making a narrower notch. Further on, you catch your first clear glimpse of the swine. A gap in the undergrowth reveals a slope where a dozen pigs are rooting, their dark bodies moving slowly as they push their snouts into the leaf litter. You can hear the wet snuffling sound, the occasional crack of an acorn being bitten. One pig, a large black sow, lifts her head at your presence, her small eyes glistening, then lowers it again, uninterested. The swineherd is a distant figure sitting on a stump, his back against a tree, his crook across his knees. You do not approach. You are here to gather what the pigs do not reach, and there is no need for words. You turn aside and begin filling the basket under a nearby oak. The morning passes in this way, a slow accumulation of acorns and steps. You lose track of how many times you have knelt and risen. The basket fills and empties, the sound of pouring acorns becoming as regular as breathing. Your fingers are stained with tannin, a faint brownish tint that will wash off in water but remains for now. Your back begins to feel the gentle ache of repeated bending, not pain exactly, but a sensation of work done and still to do. You pause every now and then to roll your shoulders or shift the water-skin strap, and then you continue. The forest light has shifted around you, the pale patches on the ground now longer and more golden as the sun climbs higher behind the thinning clouds. The mist in the valley has burned away entirely. You can see a wider stretch of the wood, the way the oaks stand with centuries of space between them, their great limbs stretching out horizontally before bending upward. Some of these trees were old when your grandfather's grandfather gathered acorns here. Their roots go deep into the forest of Dean, into the red soil and the limestone beneath, anchoring a world that changes only with the slow turn of seasons. You pause to empty the sack and count the bushels again, though you know the number from the tally stick. 2 full measures now sit in the coarse linen, and the basket holds the beginnings of a third. You pour the sack's contents back again, lifting the heavy cloth, and the acorns make a deeper sound as they settle into their own weight. You move to a fresh tree, one with a wide canopy and branches that sweep low, almost brushing the ground. Here the acorns are exceptionally large, the kind the steward remarks upon with a nod of approval. You kneel and begin to gather them, your hands moving in that same steady cadence. The large acorns fill the basket quickly, and soon the third bushel is complete. You carve the third notch, a clean V beside the others, and the morning feels full. A few more hours will pass before noon, but you do not measure them in hours. You measure them in bushels and notches, in the slow walking from oak to oak, in the gentle sounds of the forest that has begun to feel less like background and more like company. The distant grunting of the pigs, the occasional rustle of a bird in the undergrowth, the soft susurration of a breeze that stirs the highest leaves without reaching the ground. You are part of it, as much as the deer that you sometimes glimpse on the far side of a clearing, as much as the squirrel that scolds from a branch and then forgets you. The morning will end when the light tells you it is time to rest, when the sun stands at that particular angle that means midday. Until then, you gather, under this oak and the next, moving along the track, basket swinging, fingers working, the quiet tally of the day mounting in the sack and on the stick. Nothing disturbs the peace, and no thought breaks the surface of your calm. The forest of Dean holds you in its ancient repetitive rhythm, and you move with it, one acorn at a time. You choose a tree that seems to have been waiting for you, an oak of great age whose branches spread wide and low, the tips of its outermost twigs nearly brushing the forest floor. It stands a little apart from its neighbours, claiming a clearing of its own making where the leaf litter is deep and undisturbed. The trunk rises in a rough column of grey-brown bark, fissured into long vertical plates that curl at the edges like old leather, and patches of pale green lichen bloom across its surface in patterns that have taken decades to form. You stop at the edge of the canopy's shadow, looking up into the mesh of limbs, and you see that the acorn fall here has been generous. The ground beneath the tree is stippled with brown shapes, hundreds of them, some resting in the open where the leaves are thin and others half sunk into the drifts of last year's debris. The everyday heroes the everyday hift insulation tricks. And you step forward into it as you would step into a quiet room. You set down the empty bushel measure on a patch of level ground between two exposed roots, placing it carefully so the wooden base sits flat. The basket comes next, set within easy reach of your right hand, its cracked handle resting against the side of the measure. The sack, still nearly empty except for the faintest suggestion of weight at the bottom, lies folded a few paces away. You lower yourself onto your knees, feeling the leaf molds yield beneath you, damp and cool through the wall of your hose, and for a moment you simply stay there, not yet reaching for anything, letting the forest settle around you. The silence is not complete. It never is. Somewhere above, a breeze moves through the highest branches with the sound of distant water, and the single acorn drops, striking a twig with a small dry tick before it lands soundlessly on the cushion of leaves. You hear it, and then you begin. The first acorn you pick up sits by itself on a bare crescent of dark soil, its shell a glossy chestnut brown, and its cup detached, lying beside it like a discarded cap. You lift it between thumb and forefinger, feeling the smooth firmness of it, the tiny pointed tip, the slight ridge where the cup once held it. You drop it into the basket, and it makes a soft knock against the wicker. Your hand goes out again, this time gathering 4 acorns in one sweep, your fingers raking gently through the leaves to pull them free. They are not all alike, some a pale tan, almost honey-coloured, and some a deep mahogany with darker streaks, and a few still wear their cups, the rough scales catching the light. You turn each small cluster in your palm, brushing away crumbs of leaf and soil, and then let them fall into the basket with a patter like rain on dry thatch. There is no hurry to any of this. The October day stretches ahead of you in an unbroken line, and every acorn you pick is one fewer lying on the ground, one more fattening the Lord's swine. Your hands find a rhythm without your mind needing to direct them. Reach, close, lift, drop. Reach, close, lift, drop. Reach, close, lift, drop. Your fingers learn the shapes of the acorns by touch, the way some are plump and round, while others narrow to a sharper point, the way the caps fit tight or loose, the way an acorn that has begun to spoil feels lighter and softer, its shell giving under slight pressure. These you discard with a gentle toss into the ferns beyond the canopy. The good acorns go into the basket, and the basket slowly fills. Its woven sides, once pale willow, have been darkened by seasons of use, and you can see the acorns through the gaps, a shifting mosaic of browns. When the basket is half full, you shift your position, moving a little to the left where a fresh drift of acorns lies thick against a moss-covered root. You work through this patch methodically, clearing a small circle around yourself before inching forward. The leaves stir as your hands pass through them, releasing a dry scent, and once you uncover a pale white thread of fungus, a tiny network that vanishes back into the soil when you brush it aside. You do not disturb it further. Your fingers close around another handful, 6 acorns this time, cool and smooth, and you let them cascade into the basket with a sound that has become familiar. A soft rush of small hard bodies falling together. The light beneath the oak is a muted green gold, filtered through the leaves that remain on the upper branches. It moves as the sun climbs, and a single beam finds its way through a gap in the canopy, illuminating a bright oval on the ground just beside your knee. You watch it for a few seconds, noting the way the dust motes drift through it, slow and unhurried, and then you return to your work. The basket grows heavier. The weight of it begins to pull against the handle when you lift it, and soon you know it is time to empty it into the measure. You rise, your knees making a soft sound as they leave the compressed leaves, and you carry the basket in both hands to where the bushel measure waits. The wooden box is square and sturdy, its sides held by iron nails that have rusted to a dark brown. You tip the basket slowly, letting the acorns slide out in a controlled stream. They fall into the measure with a deep, rustling clatter, piling up in a rough cone, and you shake the basket gently to dislodge the last few that cling to the weave. Then you set the basket aside and kneel beside the measure, the wood of its rim pressing against your thigh. The acorns sit inside the box in a loose heap, their various shades mingling, and you use your forearm to level them. You draw your arm across the top of the measure in one smooth motion, and the excess acorns tumble over the side, landing softly on the leaves. You gather those fallen ones in a quick sweep and drop them back into the basket, then check the level again. The acorns now sit exactly flush with the top of the measure, a flat surface of brown that fills the box from corner to corner. That is 1 bushel. You look at it for a moment, the simple fact of it, and then you lift the measure by its side handles and carry it to the sack. Emptying a bushel into the sack is a careful motion. You hold the mouth of the linen sack open with one hand, gripping the folded fabric, and tilt the measure with the other. The acorns pour out in a rushing slide, heavier than water, filling the sack's bottom with a solid lump of weight. A fine dust rises from the linen, catching the light, and you wait for it to settle before lowering the sack to the ground. The bushel measure is now empty again, its wooden interior bare except for a few stray fragments of acorn shell. You tap the sides with your knuckles and the fragments fall away. Now the tally stick must be marked. You reach to your belt and draw out the smooth hazel rod, polished by handling, and the small knife from its sheath. You find an empty space along the stick, a clean stretch of pale wood between other notches, and you carve a single V-shaped cut, deep enough to last, not so deep as to weaken the stick. The blade bites into the hazel with a quiet slicing sound, and the tiny curl of wood spirals away, pale as cream. You blow on the notch to clear the dust, and then hold the stick up, checking the mark. It is neat and sharp, identical to those that came before it, and it will tell the steward what you have gathered today. You slip the tally stick back into your belt loop and the knife into its sheath, and then you stand still, letting your hands rest. The forest has not changed while you worked, but your awareness of it shifts now as you pause. The single beam of sunlight has moved, now touching a different patch of leaves, and the shadows seem a little longer than before. You can hear the distant grunting of the pigs again, faint and intermittent, a sound that has been there all along, but which you only now notice. A squirrel appears on the trunk of the oak, descending in a spiral, pausing to look at you with a black bright eye, then turning and running back up with a flick of its tail. You do not move, and it vanishes into the canopy. The breeze stirs again, and a few leaves detach from the upper branches, falling in a slow wobble, their descent almost lazy. One of them, a yellow-brown oak leaf, lands on the rim of the bushel measure and stays there, balanced, until you brush it off with a fingertip. You take up the water skin and drink, the liquid cool and tasting faintly of the leather it has soaked in. The swallow is slow, and you feel the water moving down your throat, a small cold path that fades quickly. You reseal the skin and hang it back on your shoulder. The pause has lasted perhaps 3 minutes, perhaps 5. You have no way of knowing and no need to know. The sun has moved a little further, the light now spilling through the leaves in a softer tone, and the air retains its coolness. You decide to return to the same oak, not because the ground beneath it is picked clean, but because you sense there are more acorns still hidden under the deeper drifts of leaves near the far side of the trunk. You walk around the tree, your feet crunching softly, and you find what you expected, a thick layer of fallen leaves pressed against a raised root, with acorns nestled beneath the surface. You kneel again, the motion now as natural as breathing, and you begin to sift. This time the gathering is a little different because the acorns are concealed, and you must push the leaves aside with a gentle sweeping motion before your fingers can close around the prize. The leaves are dry and brittle, crumbling into fragments, and they make a louder rustle as you work. Beneath them, the soil is dark and cool, and the acorns here are slightly damp, their shells darker and heavier. You pick them out one by one, wiping the clinging earth onto your tunic, and drop them into the basket with the same patient rhythm. The basket begins to fill once more, and you feel the familiar anticipation of another measure nearing completion. You will fill many bushels today, and this is simply one of them. But each bushel carries its own small history. This one began under an ancient oak with low sweeping branches, and its acorns were gathered from a cushion of leaves that had lain undisturbed since the first of the autumn fall. You know every acorn by the feel of it in your hand, by the particular shade of its shell, by the soft tick it made as it joined its companions in the wicker basket. When the basket is full, you will carry it to the measure, and you will pour, and you will level the pile with your forearm, and you will tip the acorns into the sack, where they will rest among all the others, indistinguishable, part of the greater gathering. And then you will carve another notch, and the day will continue, quiet and steady, under the canopy of the forest of Dean. You cross from the ancient oak into the deeper wood, following a path that is more a suggestion than a trail. A faint depression in the leaves where feet have passed before, but not often. The holly thickets close in on either side, their glossy dark leaves holding the shade, and here and there a beech rises pale and smooth among the rougher trunks. The air under the canopy is cooler than it was at the forest edge, carrying the smell of damp earth and the clean sharpness of fallen beech leaves. You walk slowly, the basket swinging in one hand, the bushel measure tucked under the other arm, and the sack now slung across your back with its small burden of gathered acorns pressing gently between your shoulders. The morning has moved into its middle passage, that long stretch when the light seems not to change and time becomes a steady hum rather than a tick. You stop at a place where the path widens into a small natural clearing, the ground dappled with shifting patches of grey and pale gold. 3 oaks stand at its edges, their trunks spaced as if by design, and beneath them the leaf litter lies thick and undisturbed. You set down the measure, lean the basket against a mossy stone, and lower the sack to the ground. Then you stand still for a moment, breathing in the quiet, and you notice that your breath forms a faint mist in the air, visible for a heartbeat before fading. The cold has not deepened, but there is a dampness now that was not there at dawn, a soft humidity that clings to the bark and the twigs and the fine hairs on the back of your hands. You flex your fingers once or twice to keep them loose, then kneel and begin to gather. The rhythm comes to you more easily now, as if your body has remembered what the early morning had to learn. Your hands move through the leaves with a gentle sweeping motion, uncovering acorns in clusters of 3 and 4, and the motion is so regular that it becomes a kind of quiet music played on the forest floor. You do not think about the gathering. You simply gather the way a stream does not think about flowing, but flows anyway, following the shape of the land. Your fingers close around the cool, smooth shapes, lift them, drop them into the basket. The sound they make is a soft pattering that merges with the rustle of leaves and the creak of branches overhead until you can no longer separate one sound from another. They are all part of the same thing, the same slow breathing of the wood. A hedgehog rustles somewhere to your left, a dry scratching in a drift of dead fern. You pause with your hand halfway to the basket and turn your head, but you do not see the creature, only the trembling of a frond where it has passed. The sound fades, and the stillness returns, deeper than before. You resume your work, picking 2 acorns that have nestled together in a hollow, their shells touching, their caps still joined by a dry stem. You separate them with a gentle twist and drop them one after the other into the basket. The basket is now a quarter full, the acorns piling up in a loose cone, their colors shifting as new ones join the old. You shift on your knees and move to the next oak. This one younger and more slender, its bark a smoother grey with patches of pale green lichen spreading like maps across its surface. The ground beneath it is littered with acorns that are smaller and rounder, Their shells are uniform light brown, and they lie so thickly that you can gather a dozen in a single sweep of your hand. Your fingers work quickly here, not from any sense of urgency, but because the plenty makes the work light, and soon the basket is half full, then 3/4. The weight of it begins to pull against the handle, and you know that the measure will soon be needed. Before you rise, you allow yourself a pause, sitting back on your heels with your hands resting on your thighs. The forest around you is not silent, but filled with a low fabric of sound, the distant grunt of a sow, the softer answering oinks of her piglets, the rustle of a bird scratching in the undergrowth, the high, thin drone of an insect somewhere above. You look up and see a patch of sky through the thinning canopy, a pale blue-gray that promises no rain. A single leaf detaches from a branch and spirals downward, rocking from side to side as it falls, and lands on the rim of the bushel measure. You watch it settle, the brown edges curling inward, and then you reach out and place it gently on the ground. When the basket is full, you rise slowly, your knees making a soft sound as they release from the leaf mold. You carry the basket to the measure and tip it carefully, letting the acorns pour in a steady stream. They fill the wooden box with that familiar rustling clatter, and you shake the basket to free the last few that cling to the weave. Then you kneel beside the measure and level the pile with your forearm, sweeping the excess over the side in a small brown cascade. The acorns sit flat and even, a perfect rectangle of gathered mast. You lift the measure, walk it to the sack, and pour. The acorns tumble into the linen with a deeper sound. Now the sack, no longer empty, but holding a soft bulging shape that shifts and settles as the new measure joins the old. A fine dust rises from the opening, catching the light, and you wait for it to clear before lowering the sack back to the ground. You take out the tally stick and the knife. The hazel rod is smooth and warm from your body, and you find a space beside the earlier notch and carve a second V as neat and sharp as the first. The blade whispers through the wood, a small shaving curling away, pale against the dark of your tunic. You blow on the notch to clear the dust and hold the stick up to the light, checking the mark. The two notches sit side by side, and you run your thumb over them, feeling the slight roughness of the cuts. Then you tuck the stick away and return the knife to its sheath. The sack now holds 2 full bushels, and the day is not yet half done. You lift the sack by its neck, testing the weight, and it pulls against your arm with a satisfying heft. You set it down again, arranging it so it will not tip, and you take up the basket and the measure and move further along the faint path deeper into the wood. The next stand of trees is mixed, oak giving way to beech, and then back to oak, and the ground rises slightly into a low ridge that catches the breeze. Here the leaves have drifted against the uphill side of the trunks, forming deep piles that rustle when you disturb them. The acorns in these drifts are harder to find, buried under layers of fallen foliage, and you must kneel and sift with both hands, pushing aside the dry brittle leaves to uncover the hidden mast. The work is slower here, but it carries its own quiet satisfaction, the pleasure of discovery repeated again and again. Each time your fingers close around an acorn hidden in the litter, there is a small quiet moment of finding, a tiny completion that asks for nothing more. You work along the ridge, moving from tree to tree, the basket filling in slow increments. The light continues its imperceptible shift, the pale patches on the ground sliding further east, and the shadows under the trees grow a little longer, a little softer. The breeze stirs the high branches, and there is a sound like a distant sea, the rush of wind through leaves that are not yet ready to fall. You pause to listen, and in the pause you become aware of your own breathing, steady and slow, your breath misting faintly in the cool air, and then vanishing. You are not tired, not exactly, but there is a pleasant heaviness in your limbs, the weight of work done and still to do, and you welcome it the way you welcome the quiet of the forest. The third bushel comes more slowly than the first 2. The acorns harder won from the deep leaf drifts, but it comes all the same. You fill the basket in stages, rising and kneeling, moving from one tree to the next along the ridge, and when the basket is finally full, you carry it back to where you left the measure and the sack. The walk is short, the path familiar now, and you pour the acorns into the measure with the same careful motion you have used all morning. The wooden box fills, the pile is leveled, the measure is emptied into the sack. The sack now bulges with a more pronounced roundness. its side straining gently against the contents, and when you lift it, the weight is substantial, a solid mass of gathered mast. You carve the third notch, the knife moving through the hazel with the same quiet precision. The tally stick now bears 3 marks, neat and evenly spaced, and you hold it for a moment, looking at the record of your morning. 3 bushels gathered, and the sun has not yet reached its highest point. You slick the stick back into your belt and drink from the water skin, the liquid cool and faintly metallic, washing the dryness from your throat. You reseal the skin and let it hang at your side, and then you simply stand, doing nothing, looking out over the forest from your small height on the ridge. Below you, the wood stretches away in a pattern of grey trunks and brown leaves and patches of dark green holly. A stream glints faintly through the trees, a thin silver thread moving without sound. You can see the pigs in a clearing to the south, dark shapes moving slowly among the trunks, and you can hear the faint call of the swineherd, a wordless sound that carries on the breeze before fading. The sky above the canopy is a soft uniform grey, brightening toward the east where the sun burns through, and you feel the day settle around you like a familiar garment, worn and comfortable, and asking nothing more than what you are already giving. You pick up the basket and the measure and move on. The path leads downward from the ridge into a hollow where the trees grow thicker and the light is dimmer, and you find a fresh scattering of acorns under a large beech whose roots spread out like the arms of an octopus. You kneel again, the leaf mold cool and damp, and your hands begin their slow rhythm once more. The basket fills, the measure waits, the sack bulges, and the quiet hours of the mid-morning pass in their gentle, unmeasured way, one acorn after another, one step after another, under the patient roof of the forest of Dean. The path you've been following dips into a shallow glade where the trees draw back and the light opens into a wide, pale circle overhead. Here the ground is softer underfoot, padded with moss and short grass, rather than deep leaf litter, and a fallen log lies across the far end of the clearing, its bark long stripped away by weather and the rubbing of swine. You slow as you enter this space because it is already occupied, the glade filled with the quiet busyness of the Pannage herd. Some 20 pigs are scattered across the open ground and into the brush at its edges, their dark shapes moving with a low, constant energy, and the sound they make is a soft symphony of grunts and snuffles and the occasional crack of an acorn bitten cleanly in two. You stop at the edge of the glade, setting down the bushel measure beside a young holly bush, and you stand watching. There is no reason to hurry past them. The forest is large, and the acorns are everywhere, and a few minutes spent observing the swine is its own kind of rest. You lean the basket against your leg and let your shoulders drop, feeling the pleasant ache of the morning's work settle into your back. The pigs have not noticed you, or if they have, they do not care. Their world is the leaf litter and the hidden mast, the cool damp soil beneath, and the slow filling of their bellies. The herd is a mixture of sizes and colors, all of them the long-legged, hairy-backed swine of the medieval forest, creatures that bear little resemblance to the pink, hairless pigs of a later age. The largest is a sow of immense girth, her coat a dark iron-grey bristling along her spine, her snout long and mobile as it works, the ground in sweeping arcs. She wears a bell on a leather collar, a dull bronze shape that clanks softly with each movement, and the sound is a steady, reassuring note beneath the other noises. Around her cluster, her piglets, perhaps 8 of them, smaller and lighter on their feet, their coats striped faintly with paler bands that will fade as they grow. They imitate the sow's motions with a clumsy eagerness, rooting in the same patch of ground, crowding close to her side, and occasionally giving small, high-pitched grunts when they find something particularly good. Beyond the family group, the other pigs spread out in a loose, shifting pattern. A boar with one torn ear stands apart near the fallen log, his tusks visible as pale curves against his dark lip when he lifts his head. He is not aggressive, only watchful, and after a moment he lowers his snout and returns to his foraging. A smaller sow, reddish-brown and sleek, works her way along the edge of the holly bushes, pushing her nose under the low branches to find the acorns that have rolled into the shadows. 2 half-grown shoats chase each other briefly around a mossy stump, then lose interest and flop down in the soft grass, their sides heaving for a minute before they too begin to root where they lie. The swineherd is here, as you knew he would be. He sits on the fallen log at the far side of the glade, a boy of perhaps 13 or 14 years, his crook laid across his knees and his back against the rough bark of a standing oak. His eyes are half closed, not in true sleep, but in that drowsy, watchful rest that comes from long hours in the forest. He wears a brown wool tunic with a hood pushed back, and his feet are wrapped in strips of cloth bound with leather thongs. A small horn hangs at his belt, carved from cow horn and polished to a dull sheen, and a linen bag that probably holds his midday bread. He does not speak to you, and you do not speak to him. The two of you are separate parts of the same quiet enterprise, and words are not needed. You watch the pigs for a while longer, noting the way they eat. A pig's method of gathering acorns is not so different from your own, though it uses its snout instead of fingers. The sow with the bell pushes her nose through the leaf litter in a long furrow, the dark soil turning up behind her, and when she finds an acorn she crunches it with a single decisive bite, the shell cracking audibly before moving on to the next. The piglets are less efficient, nosing at every small object, sometimes missing acorns entirely or picking up pebbles and spitting them out with small wet sounds. But they are learning, and the acorns they do eat are adding flesh to their bones, fat to their frames. This is the purpose of pannage, the ancient rite that allows the Lord's swine to feed in the royal forest from early October until late November. The acorns you gather will go to the same end, stored and fed to those pigs that cannot range freely or kept for the harder weeks of early winter when the forest floor is bare. Your work and the pigs' work are the same work, only carried out by different means. A jay calls from somewhere in the canopy, a harsh screech that cuts through the soft grunting and then fades. The sow lifts her head at the sound, her small eyes glinting, her ears swiveling forward and then back. She stands motionless for a long moment, her bell falling silent, and then she lowers her snout and continues to feed. The spell of stillness passes, and the glade returns to its quiet rhythm. You pick up your basket and measure, leaving the sack where it rests at the edge of the clearing, and you move away from the pigs, skirting the glade along its eastern edge, where a slope rises gently toward a stand of beech and hornbeam. The ground under these trees is different again, the leaf litter thinner and mixed with the small triangular nuts of beech mast. You find a spot where an old beech has dropped a heavy crop, the ground beneath it scattered with both acorns and beech nuts, and you kneel to begin gathering. The work here requires a little more sorting. The beech nuts are small and sharp-edged, their husks prickly, and you must pick them out from among the acorns with care. They have value, though less than acorns, and you drop them into the basket where they mingle with the larger, smoother shells. The steward will count them as half measures when he tallies the final haul, and you will mark them on the tally stick with the shallower notch. Your hands return to their slow, steady rhythm. The encounter with the pigs has not disturbed the flow of the day. It has simply been part of it, like the shifting light or the passing of a cloud. You gather under the beech for a while, the basket filling more slowly here because of the sorting, and then you move on to an oak that grows at the top of the slope. This tree is younger and more upright than the sprawling giant you worked under earlier, its trunk straight and tall, its branches beginning only above your head. The acorns beneath it are plentiful, and you work through them quickly, the basket growing heavy against your arm. When the basket is full, you carry it back down the slope to the edge of the glade, where you left the measure and the sack. The pigs are still there, though they have shifted position, the sow now near the fallen log and the boar rooting at the far side of the clearing. The swineherd has not moved, though his eyes are open now, watching the herd with a placid, unfocused gaze. You set down the basket and tip it into the measure, the acorns rattling into the wooden box in a familiar stream. You level the pile with your forearm, the excess tumbling over the side, and then you empty the measure into the sack. The sack now holds 3 full bushels and a portion of the 4th, its sides bulging with a solid, rounded weight. You carve the 4th notch on the tally stick, the knife biting into the hazel with a soft whisper, and the curl of wood falls to the grass. The pigs grunt softly in the background, and the bell clanks, and the forest holds you all in its wide, patient silence. The morning has grown warmer by a slight degree, the mist that clung to the hollows now completely burned away, and the light that reaches the forest floor is a clearer, brighter gold. You notice the way it catches the edges of the holly leaves and glints on the polished surface of a fallen acorn, turning it for a moment into a small brown jewel. You drink from the water skin, the liquid cool and tasting of leather, and then you pick up the basket and return to the slope for another round of gathering. The pigs continue their slow rooting, the swineherd continues his quiet watch, and you continue your steady accumulation, moving through the morning with the same unhurried pace as everything else in the forest of Dean. You find a fresh patch under a hornbeam whose leaves have turned a pale butter yellow, and you kneel in the dappled shade. The acorns here are medium-sized. Their shells are warm mid-brown, and they lie so thickly that you can gather a full basket without rising from your knees. Your hands move in the rhythm that has become second nature, reaching and closing and lifting and dropping, and the basket fills with a soft, continuous patter. A beetle crosses your path, a dark blue-black thing with shining wing cases, and you pause to let it pass before resuming your work. The forest is full of such small lives, and you are only one among them. When the basket is full again you stand, your knees making no protest now, and you carry it back to the measure. The pigs have moved a little closer to your side of the glade, the sow with the bell now no more than 20 paces away. She lifts her head as you pass, her snout twitching, and then she returns to her foraging, satisfied that you are no threat. The piglets tumble around her feet, and one of them, bolder than the others, trots a few steps in your direction before thinking better of it and scampering back. You smile without meaning to, a small movement of the mouth that comes and goes, and then you pour the acorns into the measure and level them and tip them into the sack. The 4th bushel is complete. You carve the notch, blow away the dust, and the tally stick now shows 4 neat marks in a row. The morning continues in this way, a slow alternation of gathering and measuring, of silence and the soft sounds of the forest. You move from tree to tree along the slope, working your way back toward the deeper wood, and the sack grows heavier with each completed bushel. The light climbs higher, the shadows shorten, and the pigs in the glade below you gradually drift toward the far end of the clearing, following the sow with the bell as she leads them onto fresh ground. The swineherd rises from his log, stretching his arms above his head, and then he follows them, his crook swinging loosely at his side. He disappears into the trees without a backward glance, and the glade is empty again, the grass and moss marked only by the dark furrows where the pigs have rooted. You are alone now, but the forest does not feel empty. It never does. The trees stand around you in their ancient patience, the leaves rustle overhead, and the acorns continue their slow fall from the high branches, one by one, the quiet metronome of the season. You kneel under a fresh oak, the light pooling around you in warm patches, and your hands begin their work again. The basket fills, the measure waits, the sack bulges, and the 4th bushel gives way to the beginning of the 5th. The morning stretching on in its gentle, unhurried way, full of nothing more than the simple fact of gathering under the October sky. The morning thins out by degrees, its edges softening, and you find that your pace has slowed without your having decided to slow it. The sun has climbed to its highest point, or near enough that the shadows under the trees have shrunk to small dark pools hugging the roots, and the light that falls through the canopy is a pale, steady gold, no longer shifting, but simply present. You notice this change in the same way you notice the coolness of the air or the weight of the basket against your arm, a fact of the day that asks for no response. Your hands, which had been moving in their slow gathering rhythm for what feels like a long while, gradually come to rest, and you stand upright beside an oak, the basket half full and hanging at your side. A small stream runs through this part of the wood, a thread of water that you have been aware of in the corner of your hearing for some time, a low liquid murmur beneath the rustle of leaves. You turn toward it now, leaving the measure and the sack where they sit at the base of the tree, and you walk the short distance to its bank. The stream is not wide, no more than 3 strides across, and it moves with such languor that its surface barely wrinkles. The water slides over a bed of smooth grey stones and pale sand, and in the deeper hollows it pools into brown glass stillness reflecting the overhanging branches and the soft grey sky above. Moss grows thick on the stones at the edge, a deep green cushion that looks cool and dry despite its dampness. You find a flat rock near the water, its surface worn smooth by some long-ago flood, and you lower yourself onto it, setting the basket aside and letting the water skin slip from your shoulder. This is the noonday halt, though you do not call it that or give it any name. It is simply the moment when the body asks for stillness and the mind, which has asked for nothing all morning, agrees. You stretch your legs out before you, feeling the pleasant pull of muscles that have been bent and straightened many times since dawn. Your shoes are damp at the toes from the leaf litter, and there is a smudge of dark soil on the knee of your hose. You brush at it absently, then let your hand fall, your gaze moving out over the stream and the quiet tangle of the wood beyond. The forest at midday is not silent, but its sounds are thinner, more widely spaced. A bird calls from somewhere downstream, a single sweet note that fades without answer. The stream makes its soft, continuous murmur, a sound you have to listen for before it becomes clear, and then once heard, it seems to have been there all along. A breeze moves through the highest branches with a sound like a distant sigh. Beneath these sounds, there is a deeper stillness, a sense that the wood itself is resting, suspended in the pale October light. You are part of that stillness now, and you sit without moving, your hands resting on your thighs, your breathing slow and even. After a time, you reach for the linen pouch that hangs at your belt, the one you packed in the dim cottage before dawn. You loosen the drawstring and tip the contents carefully into your lap. The first thing that comes out is a piece of rye bread, a thick slab cut from the loaf, its crust dark and rough, and its interior dense and grey-brown. You set it on your knee while you reach in again, this time drawing out a small parcel wrapped in a nettle cloth. The fibers of the cloth pale green and soft from many washings. Inside the parcel is a lump of hard cheese, pale yellow and slightly crumbly at the edges, with the faint, clean sharpness of aged milk. Next to the cheese, still in your pouch, is a withered apple from the tree by the cottage, its skin wrinkled and its flesh soft to the touch. The last of the autumn windfalls. You arrange these things on your lap, the bread on one knee, the cheese in its cloth on the other, the apple cupped in your palm, and you look at them for a moment without hurry, as if the meal itself is a small landscape to be observed. The water skin is unstoppered with a soft pop of the wooden plug, and you lift it to your lips, tilting it slowly. The water is cool, cooler than the air, and it carries the faint metallic taste of the leather, a taste that is not unpleasant, but simply familiar, the flavor of all the water you have drunk in the forest since the season began. You swallow once, twice, and then lower the skin, sealing it and setting it aside on the rock beside you. The water spreads a small, cold path down your throat and settles in your stomach, and you feel it there, a quiet sensation that comes and then fades. You break off a piece of the rye bread, the crust resisting for a moment before giving way with a soft crack. The bread is chewy and dense, and you chew it slowly, your jaw working in a steady rhythm that matches the pace of the stream. The taste is mild, a little sour, with the earthy depth of the rye grain. You eat the first piece and then break off another, smaller this time, holding it in your fingers while you turn your attention to the cheese. The nettle cloth falls open, and you pick up the lump of cheese and bring it to your mouth, biting off a small corner. The cheese is firm and slightly grainy, and its flavor is sharp and clean, cutting through the denseness of the bread. You chew the two together, the bread and the cheese mingling into a single taste, and you swallow, and then sit still, letting the mouthful settle. The withered apple waits in your palm, its skin brown and puckered in places. But when you bite into it, the flesh inside is surprisingly sweet, softer than a fresh apple, but still holding its shape. The juice is scant, just a faint moisture, but the flavor is concentrated, a deep autumn sweetness that tastes of the sunlit afternoons when it hung on the branch. You eat it slowly, turning it in your hand after each bite, and when only the core remains, you toss it gently into the ferns at the edge of the stream, where it will feed some small creature before the day is through. You return to the bread and cheese, eating in the same unhurried way, breaking off small pieces and chewing them thoroughly before reaching for more. There is no need to rush. The forest does not ask you to finish quickly, and the acorns will still be there when you are done. The stream murmurs beside you, and the light holds steady on the water, and you eat your simple meal with the same quiet attention you have given to every other part of the day. While you chew, your eyes wander over the scene before you, and you become aware of the small lives of the forest going about their own midday business. On the trunk of a beech tree directly across the stream, a squirrel appears, descending headfirst in a series of short, jerky movements. Its fur is a reddish-brown along its back, paler on its belly, and its tail flicks behind it in a continuous wave. It stops halfway down the trunk, freezes with one paw raised, and turns its head to look at you. Its eye is small and black and bright, and it regards you for a long moment, utterly still. Then, as if deciding that you are of no consequence, it turns and spirals back up the trunk, disappearing into the fork of a branch, and the tree is still again. You watch the place where it vanished for a little while, but it does not return. A jay calls once from somewhere deeper in the wood, a harsh single screech that tears the quiet open and then closes it again. The sound hangs in the air for a heartbeat and then fades, and the silence that follows seems deeper than before, as if the forest is listening. You listen too, your hand paused halfway to your mouth, and then the moment passes and you continue chewing, the bread now softened by the cheese and the water. The spiders have been busy in the shaded air between the branches. You notice their webs now, stretched across gaps in the undergrowth, delicate constructions of silk that catch the low light and hold it. The webs are dotted with tiny beads of dew that have not evaporated in the cool shade, each bead a perfect sphere, silver and still. You count the webs without meaning to, 3 of them visible from where you sit, and you see that one holds the empty husk of a small fly, the silk wrapped around it in a neat package. The spider that built it is nowhere to be seen, probably hidden under a leaf or in a crevice of bark, waiting out the daylight hours as you were waiting out the midday pause. You watch the dew beads tremble slightly in a breath of breeze, and then the breeze dies and they are still again. Tiny perfect mirrors reflecting the grey sky and the dark twigs above. Your meal is nearly finished now, only a last piece of bread remains, and you eat it slowly, savouring the chewiness before you swallow. You take another drink from the water skin, a longer draught this time, and the coolness spreads through your chest. Then you seal the skin and set it aside, letting your hands rest on your knees. The cheese is gone, the bread is gone. The apple core is already being explored by a small brown ant at the edge of the ferns. You gather the crumbs that have fallen onto your tunic, brushing them into your palm with a careful sweep of your fingers, and you scatter them on the ground beside the stream for the birds. The nettle cloth you fold neatly, tucking the empty cheese marks inside, and you slip it back into your pouch and pull the drawstring closed. You do not rise immediately. The flat rock has warmed slightly from your body, and the stream continues its slow murmur, and there is a deep quiet in you that matches the quiet of the wood. You stretch your fingers out, opening and closing them slowly, feeling the joints flex after the long morning of gripping and releasing. A faint stiffness has settled into the knuckles, nothing painful, only the memory of work. You flex them several times, watching the tendons move under the skin, and then you let your hands fall loose again. The sun has moved a little, as it must, and the shadow of the beech tree now reaches the edge of the stream, a dark finger touching the water. The light on the mossy stones has shifted from gold to a paler hue, and you know without thinking that the midday pause is drawing to its natural close. But you do not hurry. You sit for a while longer, your mind empty of any particular thought, aware only of the stream and the trees and the cool October air against your cheeks. There are no worries in this stillness, no plans forming, no inward conversation about the bushels yet to be gathered, or the notches yet to be carved. There is only the open awareness of the wood at rest, and you resting within it. When the time feels right, though you could not say what makes it so, you lift the water skin from the rock and slip its strap over your shoulder. You pick up the basket, now empty of everything but a few stray leaf fragments, and you rise slowly, your knees making no protest on the soft moss. You stand for a moment looking at the stream, at the way the water slides over the stones without end, and then you turn and walk back through the trees to where you left the measure and the sack. The sack sits where you left it, its rounded shape undisturbed, and the bushel measure rests beside it, empty and waiting. You do not carve a notch for the midday halt, because it has not been a halt in the tally, but simply a pause in the rhythm, a space between the morning's gathering and the afternoon's. The tally stick stays in your belt, its 4 notches unchanged, and the knife remains in its sheath. You lift the measure and the sack, settling the sack's weight across your back, and you begin to walk slowly along the stream's edge, looking for the next tree and the next scattering of acorns, the afternoon stretching ahead of you in a long, calm line. The afternoon begins in the same way the morning did, with an oak and a scattering of acorns and the weight of the basket in your hand, but the light has shifted around you, and the air carries a different quality now. The sun has crossed the highest point of its arc and begun its slow descent toward the western hills, though you cannot see it through the canopy. Instead, you feel the change in the way the shadows fall, longer and softer than they were at noon, stretching out from the trunks in pale blue-grey fingers that touch the bases of neighboring trees. The color of the light has warmed too, losing the pale silver of early morning and taking on a honeyed tone that makes the bark of the oaks glow faintly and the fallen leaves seem richer, deeper brown. You notice these things without cataloguing them, the way you notice the coolness of your own breath or the steady beat of your heart, and you continue walking, the sack heavy on your back, the bushel measure tucked under your arm. You have been gathering since daybreak, and the sack now holds 4 full bushels. The weight of it pulls the linen tight across your shoulders, a solid, rounded mass that shifts slightly with each step. You set it down at the base of a large oak near the stream, the same stream that murmured beside you during the midday halt, and you untie the cord that holds the sack's mouth closed. The linen falls open, and you peer inside at the dark mass of acorns, their shells glinting faintly in the filtered light. It is good mast, dry and sound, and you run your fingers through the top layer, feeling the cool, smooth shapes, checking for any sign of damp or rot. There is none. You close the sack again and leave it at the base of the tree, taking only the basket and the measure with you as you move deeper into the afternoon. The woods in this part of the forest are older, the trees spaced more widely, their trunks massive and their branches spreading high above before intertwining. The ground beneath them is open, the undergrowth sparse, and the leaf litter lies in a deep, even carpet that crunches softly under your shoes. You walk for a short while scanning the ground, and then you find what you were looking for. A tree whose base is thick with fallen acorns, the mast so plentiful that you can see it from 20 paces away, a brown tide washing up against the roots. You set the bushel measure on a level patch and kneel beside it, the familiar motions already beginning before you have consciously decided to begin them. The gathering in the afternoon has a different texture than it did in the morning. Your hands are surer now, their movements so practiced that they seem to work on their own, leaving your mind free to drift across the quiet landscape of the wood. You pick up acorns in clusters of 5 and 6, your fingers raking through the leaves with a gentle combing motion, and the basket fills more quickly than it did in the early hours. There is no haste in this speed. It is simply the natural ease of a body that has done a thing many times, the way a bird builds a nest without deliberation, the way water finds its channel and flows. The acorns tumble into the basket with a soft, continuous pattering, and the sound merges with the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the stream into a single, low fabric of noise that is almost silence. You work through the first patch and move on to a second, shifting on your knees and then to a third. The light continues its slow transformation, the golden honey tone deepening toward amber, and the shadows grow longer and more distinct. A tree that cast a small dark circle at noon now throws a long oval that nearly touches the next tree over. You notice how the shadows move as you move, changing shape with each shift of your body. And you notice how the acorns catch the low light, their shells glistening in places, matte in others. Some are so dark they are almost black, and some are the pale tan of dried grass, and together in the basket they make a mosaic of browns that shifts and rearranges itself with each new handful. When the basket is full, you carry it to the measure and tip it in, the acorns pouring with a dry, swift rattle. You shake the basket to release the last few, then level the pile with the sweep of your forearm, the excess spilling over the sides onto the leaves. The measure is full, a neat rectangle of gathered mast, and you lift it and carry it back to where the sack waits at the base of the large oak. You open the sack and pour the acorns inside, and they tumble down into the darkness with a sound like rain on a roof, the weight of the sack increasing with each measure. You close the sack again and return to the measure, which is now empty and waiting, and you pick up the basket and move further along the stream. A badger set lies near the next bend of the water, a cluster of dark openings dug into the slope where the roots of an ancient beech hold the soil in place. The entrances are oval and smooth-edged, the earth around them packed hard by the passage of heavy bodies, and a faint, musky smell hangs in the air, not unpleasant. You stop a short distance away, not wanting to disturb the occupants, and you gather acorns from the trees nearby, your movements a little quieter, a little more deliberate. The badgers themselves are not visible. They are asleep in their underground chambers, curled in nests of dry grass, waiting for the darkness when they will emerge to forage. You work around the set in a wide arc, leaving plenty of space, and the only sign of life is a single black and white feather caught on a root, left by some bird that passed this way before you. The fifth bushel accumulates slowly under these trees. The acorns here more scattered than they were under the heavy-bearing oak, and you move from trunk to trunk along the stream bank, filling the basket in stages. The water beside you continues its steady, unhurried flow, and occasionally you catch a glint of light on its surface, a brief silver flash that appears and vanishes. The moss on the stones is a deeper green now, the shade having covered it since morning, and a few late midges dance above the water in small, tight spirals, their wings catching the light. You watch them for a moment, then return your eyes to the ground and continue gathering. When the basket is finally full, you carry it to the measure, pour, level, and then walk the measure to the sack. The pouring sound is heavier now, the sack already holding a substantial weight, and the new bushel settles in with a soft, shifting crunch. You close the sack and then reach for your belt, drawing out the tally stick and the knife. The hazel rod is warm from your body, its surface smooth and polished, and you find an empty space beside the 4 earlier notches and carve a fifth. The blade cuts cleanly through the pale wood, and a tiny curl of it falls away, drifting down onto the leaves. You blow on the notch, and the stick now holds 5 marks, a neat row of V-shaped cuts recording the day's work. You turn the stick over in your hand, looking at the cross mark at the top that identifies it as yours, and then you slip it back into your belt and return the knife to its sheath. The afternoon is now well advanced. You can feel the day tilting toward evening, though the sun is still above the treetops and the light remains strong, if softer. You sit down on a fallen branch near the stream, the wood grey and smooth from years of weather, and you take the water skin from your shoulder and drink. The water is no longer cool. It has taken on the temperature of the air, but it still washes the dryness from your throat and leaves a faint metallic taste on your tongue. You reseal the skin and let it hang at your side, and then you sit still for a while, watching the stream and the trees and the small, busy lives that move through them. The sow and her piglets have wandered nearer while you worked. You see them now through a gap in the undergrowth, the large, dark shape of the sow and the smaller, darting forms of her young. They are perhaps 30 paces away, working along the far bank of the stream, and their snouts make wet, snuffling sounds as they root through the damp soil. The bell on the sow's collar clanks softly with each movement, a steady, rhythmic note that carries on the still air. One of the piglets breaks away from the group and trots down to the water's edge, where it drinks with small, rapid laps, its tail twitching behind it. When it is finished, it stands still for a moment, staring across the stream, and then it turns and scurries back to its mother, disappearing under her broad flank. You watch them pass, a slow procession of dark shapes moving through the shafts of amber light, and then the undergrowth closes around them, and they are gone. You rise from the fallen branch, stretching your arms above your head, and you feel the pleasant tiredness that has settled into your shoulders and your lower back. It is not exhaustion, not the deep ache of overwork, but the mild, satisfying fatigue of a body that has been used well. You roll your shoulders once, twice, and then you pick up the basket and walk back to where the measure and the sack are waiting. The sack now holds 5 full bushels, a weight that would be too much to carry far, and you know that when the day ends, you will need to transfer the acorns to the steward's cart in several trips or wait for the cart itself to come to you. But that is a thought for later, for the dim hour before dusk, and you set it aside without dwelling on it. The afternoon still has time in it, and the acorns are still falling, one by one, from the high branches. You find another oak, this one standing alone in a small clearing where the ground is thick with mast, and you kneel and begin to gather the 6th bushel. Your hands move in their old rhythm, steady and unhurried, and the forest holds you in its quiet amber afternoon, asking nothing more than what you are already giving. The light has begun to take on the first faint hint of evening by the time you hear the hoofbeats, a sound so soft and regular that it seems to grow out of the forest's own quiet rather than intrude upon it. You are kneeling beside a half-filled basket, your fingers paused around a cluster of acorns, and you lift your head and listen. The sound comes from the east, where the forest ride runs broad and level between the old oaks. a path of packed earth cleared long ago for carts and horsemen. The hoofbeats are slow, a steady 4-beat walk, and they are accompanied by the occasional creak of leather and the light jingle of a bit ring. You do not rise immediately. There is no need. You finish picking up the acorns in your hand, drop them into the basket with a soft patter, and then straighten, brushing the leaf fragments from your knees. The horse and rider emerge from between the trees a moment later, parting the dappled shade like a curtain. The horse is a solid, heavy-boned animal of a kind you've seen before, a bay with a dark mane and tail, its coat a deep reddish-brown that gleams faintly in the amber light. It walks with its head low, its eyes half-closed, and its hooves make a soft, cushioned thud on the leaf-strewn earth of the ride, as if it too has been moving through the forest all afternoon and feels no need for haste. The rider sits easily in the saddle, a man of middle years with a grey wool cloak wrapped around his shoulders, the hood thrown back to reveal a face that is both familiar and unremarkable. This is the Lord's Steward, the man who rides the bounds of the Pannage season to count the gathered mast and record the work of the gatherers. You have seen him before, perhaps a dozen times in as many autumns, and you feel no particular emotion at his approach, only a quiet acknowledgement that the day's rhythm will pause for a brief while before resuming. The steward brings his horse to a halt a few paces away, the animal stopping with the soft, blowing breath that stirs the dry leaves on the ground. He looks down at you with a placid, somewhat tired expression, his eyes crinkled at the corners from years of squinting into the low forest light, and he nods once, a small motion of greeting that asks for nothing more than a nod in return. You give it, tipping your head, and then you set the basket aside and walk the few steps to where the sack and the measure rest at the base of the nearest oak. He dismounts with the slow, careful movement of a man who has spent many hours in the saddle and knows the ache it can leave in the hips if one moves too quickly. His right leg swings over the horse's rump, his left foot leaves the stirrup, and he drops the last short distance to the ground with a soft grunt, his boots landing solidly on the earth. The horse stands patient and heavy-lidded, its reins dangling, and the steward loops them once around a low branch of the oak, a casual hitch that the animal has learned to respect. Then he straightens his cloak, brushes a stray bit of straw from his sleeve, and walks over to where you stand. He is not a tall man, but he carries himself with the quiet authority of one who has been given a task and does it without fuss. His face is lined at the corners of the eyes and around the mouth, the fine lines of a life spent outdoors, and there is a small dark mole on his left cheek, just below the cheekbone, that moves slightly when he speaks. His hair is a grizzled brown, cut short and neat, and his hands are broad and capable, the nails trimmed square. He wears a tunic of dark wool under the grey cloak, and at his belt hangs a leather pouch that bulges slightly, with the shape of a wax tablet and a small stylus. He carries no weapon, no staff, nothing but the tools of his record-keeping, and his presence in the clearing is as undemanding as the presence of another tree. You show him the tally stick first, drawing it from your belt and holding it out so he can see the 5 neat notches carved into the pale hazelwood, each one a bushel, each one a bushel, each one marked beside your identifying cross at the top. He takes the stick in his hands, turning it over once, and his thumb runs across the notches, feeling their depth. He does not count aloud. The count is something he takes in at a glance, and after a moment he nods and hands the stick back to you. 5, he says, and his voice is low and slightly rough, the voice of a man who does not use many words in a day. You slip the tally stick back into your belt loop. Then he kneels beside the sack, which sits full and round on the leaf litter, its neck tied with a cord. You loosen the cord for him, opening the mouth of the sack so that the dark mass of acorns inside is visible, a solid weight of brown shapes packed tightly together. He reaches in with one hand, his fingers moving slowly through the top layer of acorns, and he scoops up a small handful and brings them out into the light. The acorns rest in his palm, a dozen of them, their shells glossy and smooth, and he turns them over with his thumb, examining each one. He checks for the tiny pinholes of weevil damage, for the softness that indicates rot, for the cracked shells that might spoil the mast if left too long. His inspection is thorough but unhurried, and you stand beside him without speaking, watching the light move through the leaves above. After a moment he drops the acorns back into the sack, brushing his palm clean on his thigh, and he nods again. "Sound, mast," he says, and the two words are quiet, almost to himself. You close the sack and retie the cord, and the steward reaches for the pouch at his belt, drawing out the wax tablet. It is a small thing, a wooden frame the size of his palm filled with dark beeswax, and its surface is marked with lines of writing that you cannot read, the records of other gatherers and other bushels. He takes the stylus, a slim bone tool with a pointed end, and he makes a small mark in the wax, pressing the point in and drawing it across. The mark is neat and compact, probably your name or your mark, followed by the number 5. You do not ask what it says, and he does not offer. The tablet is his domain, and the record it holds will travel back with him to the manor house, where someone will transfer the marks to the long rolls of parchment that track the Pannage yields. While he writes, you become aware of the forest settling around you again, the brief disruption of the horse and rider already fading back into the quiet. The horse stands motionless beside the oak, one hind leg cocked in rest, its eyelids drooping. A leaf spins down from the canopy and lands on its rump, and the horse does not flick its tail or move, simply accepts the small weight. The steward finishes his mark, blows gently on the wax to smooth any rough edges, and then closes the tablet and returns it to his pouch. He straightens, and for a moment the two of you stand together under the oak, looking out into the dimming wood. He speaks again, not because he must, but because the silence has opened a space for speech. The weather holds, he says, and his gaze moves upward to the pale strip of sky visible through the branches. Mild for October. The mast has been good this year, and the swine are fattening well. You nod, because it is true, and because an answer of more than a nod is not required. The steward does not seem to expect one. He folds his arms across his chest, his grey cloak falling in soft folds, and he stands still for another long moment, simply breathing the forest air. There is no tension in this pause, no expectation. It is the quiet of two people who understand the same work and the same season, and for whom words are not the primary language. You find yourself glancing at his face in the warm, lowering light. The crow's feet at his eyes are deeply etched, and there is a slight tiredness in the set of his mouth, a looseness that speaks of long hours and short sleep. But his eyes are clear, a pale grey-blue like the autumn sky, and they move slowly across the clearing, taking in the scattered acorns, the basket, the measure, the sack. He sees everything, you understand, though he comments on very little. When he is satisfied, he uncrosses his arms and gives a small, final nod. "I'll be back at the month's end," he says, "to count the final tally. The cart will come for the gathered mast then." This is not a command, simply information, the same information he gives every year, and you receive it with another nod. There is nothing more that needs saying. He turns and walks back to his horse, his boots crunching softly on the leaves. The horse lifts its head as he approaches, its ears swiveling forward, and it does not startle when he unhitches the reins from the branch. He gathers the reins in one hand, sets his left foot in the stirrup, and hauls himself up into the saddle with the same grunt he made when he dismounted, a small private sound of effort. Once seated, he adjusts his cloak, settling it over his legs, and he takes up the reins properly, guiding the horse's head around so that it faces back along the ride. He does not wave or call out. He simply rides away, the horse moving at the same steady walk, its hooves making the same soft, cushioned thuds on the earth. You watch him go until the trees close around him, and the sound of the hoofbeats fades into the deeper quiet of the forest. It takes longer than you might expect, the sound lingering in the still air, carrying through the trunks and the undergrowth, until it becomes indistinguishable from the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the stream. And then it is gone, and the clearing is as it was before, the sack heavy with acorns, the basket half full, the October light dimming toward the first true hint of evening. You do not stand idle. The pause has been brief enough that your muscles have not cooled, and you return to the basket and kneel once more, your hands finding the acorns under the leaves as if they had never stopped. The gathering resumes in the same steady rhythm, the basket filling gradually, the light around you deepening from amber to a softer, smokier gold. The steward's visit has left no mark on the day beyond the small, neat line in his wax tablet, and you find that your mind holds no lingering trace of the encounter. It has been, and now it is over, and the work continues. The 6th bushel accumulates slowly under this oak, The acorns here more scattered than they were by the stream, and you must move around the trunk several times to fill the basket. Each time you rise to empty the basket into the measure, you notice how the shadows have grown, stretching out from the trees in long blue-grey fingers that touch the edges of the clearing. The air has cooled by a small degree, enough to make you pull your tunic a little tighter, and the dampness of the forest floor is more pronounced now, seeping through the knees of your hose with a chill that is not unpleasant, but simply present. You work through the dimming light with the same unhurried care, picking acorns one by one, where they lie scattered, or in clusters of 3 and 4, where they have fallen thickly. The sounds of the forest shift as you work, the daytime calls of birds fading away and being replaced by the softer, more tentative sounds of evening. A robin sings a few notes from a nearby holly bush, a liquid little phrase that repeats twice and then stops. The stream, still audible in the distance, seems louder now, its murmur carrying more clearly through the cooling air. Somewhere far off, an owl calls once, a low, hollow note that hangs in the stillness before fading. You hear it and continue gathering. When the basket is full, you carry it to the measure, pour, and level. The acorns fill the wooden box exactly, and you lift it and walk it to the sack. The sack's mouth opens under your hands, and the new bushel slides in with a deep, rustling crunch, the weight of it settling against the 5 that came before. You close the sack again, and this time you do not carve a tally notch immediately. The 6th bushel is not yet complete. The measure has been filled, but the gathering continues, and you know that by the time the light fails, you will have added enough to call it done. You pick up the basket and move on to the next tree, the next scattering of mast, the next slow accumulation. The forest around you is now visibly dimmer, the gaps between the trunks filling with a soft blue dusk that seems to rise from the ground rather than fall from the sky. The leaves, which earlier glowed with their own amber light, have gone dull and shadowed, and the acorns on the ground are harder to see. You must feel for them now as much as look, your fingers brushing through the leaf litter until they close around the familiar smooth, pointed shapes. The work is slower, but it is no less steady, and you find that the rhythm of it remains unchanged. The basket fills, the measure waits, the sack bulges, and the quiet of the evening settles over you like a second cloak, warm and heavy and full of the long day. You will gather until the 6th bushel is fully recorded, until the tally stick carries 6 notches, and then you will begin the slow walk back through the darkening wood toward the cottage and the hearth and the deep, dreamless sleep that waits at the end of the Pannage day. The path you follow away from the steward's fading hoofbeats leads you deeper into the forest than you have been all day, through a stand of beech whose pale trunks rise like columns in a shadowed hall, and then into a region of the wood where the oaks grow so old and so large that they seem to belong to a different order of time. The undergrowth thins here, shaded out over centuries by the vast spread of the canopy, and the ground beneath your feet is a smooth, dark carpet of ancient leaf mold, soft and deep and yielding. You walk slowly, the basket swinging lightly in one hand, the bushel measure tucked under the other arm, and you feel the character of the wood change around you. The air is stiller, heavier, and it holds a coolness that is not quite the coolness of the autumn evening, but something older, a deep shade that has never been touched by the sun. The silence here is different too, a thick, absorbent quiet that seems to muffle even the sound of your own footsteps, and you find yourself walking more carefully as if entering a space that expects reverence. And then you see it. The oldest oak stands in its own wide clearing, a tree so immense that your mind struggles for a moment to take it in. The trunk is a wall of wood, grey-brown and deeply furrowed, its bark divided into long vertical plates that curl outward at the edges like the pages of an ancient book left open to the weather. It would take several people linking hands to encircle it, and its girth is such that the tree seems less a single living thing than a small mountain of timber, a monument that has stood here since long before the forest was called the Forest of Dean. The roots spread out from the base in great contorted ridges, some of them as thick as a person's waist, and they plunge into the earth like the fingers of a giant hand gripping the soil. The branches begin low on the trunk, some of them sweeping outward almost horizontally, before bending upward, and they are so long and so heavy that a few have been propped by forked stakes driven into the ground by some long-ago forester. The canopy above is a vast spreading dome of twigs and leaves, and though many of the leaves have fallen, those that remain are a deep, muted bronze catching the amber light of the late afternoon and holding it softly. You stop at the edge of the clearing and simply look. The tree fills your vision, and for a long moment you do not think about acorns or bushels or tally sticks. You only look and breathe and feel the presence of the oak as a quiet, steady weight in the air around you. This tree has a name, or it once did, something spoken by the charcoal burners and the swineherds and the gatherers who came before you. Perhaps it is called the boundary oak, or the king's tree, or simply the old one. You do not know the name, but you do not need to. The tree itself is enough. When you are ready, you step forward into the clearing, your shoes sinking slightly into the deep leaf litter that has accumulated here over many autumns. The ground beneath the oak is entirely bare of undergrowth, kept clear by centuries of swine and gatherers and the dense shade of the canopy, and the leaf mold forms a smooth, dark surface that crunches faintly with each step. And on this surface, spread out like a carpet of offerings, are the acorns. They lie so thickly that you cannot see the leaves beneath them, a continuous layer of brown that stretches from the trunk outward in all directions, fading into the darker shadows at the edge of the canopy. Thousands of acorns, tens of thousands a season's worth of mast, concentrated under this single ancient tree. The sight of them is almost overwhelming, but only almost. Your gatherer's heart takes it in calmly, noting the richness of the crop, the clean, glossy shells, the small dark caps scattered among the nuts like discarded thimbles. You set down the bushel measure in a level spot between two of the great roots, placing it carefully so that it will not tip. The basket you place beside it, and then you kneel, the leaf mold cool and damp through the wool of your hose. For a moment you simply stay there, your hands resting on your thighs, breathing in the deep, earthy scent of the tree. The air under the oak smells of old wood and tannin, and the faint, clean sharpness of acorn shells, a rich, layered scent that seems to hold the memory of all the autumns that have passed beneath these branches. You look up into the canopy, where the late light filters through the remaining leaves in a soft, golden-green glow, and you feel the branches spreading above you like the roof of a vast, silent hall. Then you begin to gather, and the work here is unlike any you have done today. The acorns are so abundant that you do not need to search for them or sift through the leaves. You simply reach out with both hands and scoop them up by the dozen, your fingers closing around clusters of cool, smooth shapes, and you lift them and drop them into the basket. The sound they make is a rich, rapid pattering, like a heavy rain on a tight cloth, and the basket fills with astonishing speed. You shift on your knees, moving a little to the left, and the acorns are just as thick there. A deep brown drift that you can rake through with your open fingers. You move again, a little forward, and the abundance continues. Unbroken, the tree having shed its mast in a generous, even carpet that reaches to the very edge of the canopy. The acorns under this tree are larger than most you have gathered today. Their shells are deep, glossy mahogany, and many of them still wear their rough, scaly cups. You pick up a handful and examine them briefly, turning them over in your palm. They are heavy, solid, their shells unblemished, and the cups are dark and woody, the scales crisp under your thumb. These are the acorns that the steward will note with particular approval, the kind that fatten the swine quickly and keep well through the early winter. You drop them into the basket and reach for more. The gathering under the oldest oak is a quieter, more concentrated version of the work you have done all day. The rhythm is the same, the reach and the close and the lift and the drop, but the speed is different, the basket filling in what feels like half the time. You do not hurry. You simply move with the natural efficiency of a task made easy by plenty. Your hands work steadily, your breathing slow and even, and the basket grows heavy against its woven sides, the acorns piling up in a glossy brown mound that rises above the rim. You will need to empty it soon, and you will need to empty it many times before this clearing is picked clean. That you will not pick it clean today. The tree gives more than any one gatherer could take in a single afternoon. When the basket is full to the point of spilling, you rise carefully, supporting its weight with both hands, and you carry it to the bushel measure. The walk is short, only a few paces, and you set the basket down beside the wooden box and begin to pour. The acorns slide out in a thick, rattling stream, filling the measure with a sound that is deeper and heavier than before, the large acorns settling against one another with a solid, satisfying crunch. You shake the basket to dislodge the last few, then set it aside and kneel beside the measure. The acorns mound above the rim in a rough cone, and you use your forearm to level them, drawing it across the top in a single smooth motion. The excess tumbles over the side, landing softly on the leaf litter, and you gather them up and return them to the basket. The measure is full, a perfect rectangle of dark, glossy acorns, and you lift it by its side handles and carry it to where the sack waits at the edge of the clearing. The sack is already heavy with the day's gathering, its sides bulging roundly, and when you open its mouth and pour in the new bushel, the weight of it increases noticeably. The acorns tumble down into the darkness, and the sack settles against the ground with a soft, heavy thud. You close it again, the cord pulling tight, and then you take out the tally stick and the knife. The 6th notch is carved beside the 5th, the blade cutting into the hazel with the same quiet precision as before, and the tiny curl of wood drops onto the leaves. You blow on the notch, and the stick now holds 6 marks, a neat, even row. You slip it back into your belt. You do not rest. The abundance under the oldest oak seems to call for a continuation, and you take up the basket and return to your knees in the thick of the acorn drift. The light around you has begun its slow slide toward evening, the amber glow deepening to a soft, smoky gold, and the shadows under the tree are longer and bluer than they were when you arrived. The air has cooled another degree, and you notice that your breath is now visible, a faint mist that forms and fades with each exhale. You pull your tunic a little closer, the wool warm against your shoulders, and you continue gathering. You work your way around the trunk in a slow arc, clearing a path through the acorns, and as you move, you become aware of the tree itself in a way that goes beyond simple sight. You feel its age in the rough bark under your fingers when you pause to lean against it, the deep furrows in the cool, solid mass of the wood. You sense its history, the long centuries of growth and dormancy, the storms it has weathered, the generations of creatures it has sheltered. This tree was old when the first gatherers came to the forest with their baskets and their tally sticks, and it will be old long after you are gone. You are only one more in a long line of people who have knelt beneath its branches and gathered its mast. And the thought is not a sad one, but a peaceful one. A quiet acknowledgement of your small place in the great, slow turning of the forest's life. A bird moves in the canopy above, a soft flutter of wings, and a single acorn drops from a high branch, striking a lower limb with a small sharp tick before thudding into the leaf litter beside your knee. You pick it up and add it to the basket, and the bird falls silent again. The quiet under the old oak is profound, a stillness that seems to absorb sound rather than reflect it, and your own movements feel smaller, softer, as if the tree asks for a gentler presence. You give it willingly, gathering with a light, careful touch, your fingers brushing the acorns rather than raking through them. The 7th bushel begins to accumulate as the basket fills and is emptied again. Each time you carry a full basket to the measure, the walk seems a little longer, the weight a little heavier, but the rhythm remains steady. You pour the acorns into the wooden box, level the pile, and tip them into the sack, and the sack grows rounder and fuller, its linen sides straining slightly against the load. The light continues to dim, the gold fading to a soft grey blue that creeps up from the forest floor, and the spaces between the trees become indistinct, blurred into a single dusky backdrop. You can still see the acorns clearly enough, their glossy shells catching the last of the daylight, but you know that you will not be able to gather for much longer. You sit back on your heels and look up at the tree one more time, letting your eyes trace the great branches as they spread outward and upward into the darkening sky. The remaining leaves are black silhouettes against the pale grey, and a single star has appeared in the gap between two limbs, a tiny, steady point of light. The evening chill settles around your shoulders, and you feel the pleasant tiredness of the long day, the deep, full ache of work that has been steady and good. You breathe in the cool, tannin-scented air, and then you lower your gaze and return to the gathering. When the 7th bushel is finally complete, the basket emptied and the measure leveled and the acorns poured into the sack, You carve the 7th notch on the tally stick. The knife moves through the hazel with a soft, whispering cut, and the notch joins the others in a neat, even row. You blow away the dust and hold the stick up to the fading light, and the 7 marks are clear and sharp, a record of the day that will be read by the steward and then erased at the season's end. The stick shaved clean for another year. You tuck it back into your belt and stand, your knees making a soft sound as they leave the leaf mold, and you gather up the basket and the measure and the heavy, bulging sack. The oldest oak stands silent and dark behind you as you turn to leave, its branches still holding the memory of the day's light. You walk slowly out of the clearing and back into the deeper wood, the path familiar now. The forest settling into its nocturnal quiet around you. The work under the ancient tree is done, but the tree itself remains, patient and enduring, waiting for the next gatherer and the next autumn and the next slow fall of acorns onto the soft, dark earth. You leave the oldest oak behind you in the gathering dusk, the vast dark shape of it receding into the shadows until it is only another mass among the trees, and you walk the familiar path back through the stand of beech toward the lighter, more open wood where you worked through the morning. The evening has arrived quietly, without announcement, the way it always does in the forest. The light that remains is a soft, diffuse blue-gray, the color of smoke or of deep water, and it seems to rise from the ground rather than fall from the sky, pooling in the hollows and spilling out between the trunks. The air has cooled several degrees since the afternoon, and your breath makes a faint mist that appears and vanishes with each exhale, a small, steady rhythm that matches your footsteps. You have gathered 7 bushels, the sack heavy on your back, and yet you do not hurry home. There is still a little light left, and there are still acorns on the ground, and the habits of the season are strong in you, urging you to gather what you can before the darkness closes in completely. You stop at a place where the path crosses a small mossy rise, a hummock of ground where an old tree once fell and has long since rotted away into a mound of dark, rich soil. Here the oaks grow a little younger, their trunks no more than a few handspans wide, and the leaf litter beneath them is thin and scattered. You set down the sack and the measure, letting the weight of the gathered mast rest against the slope of the hummock, and you take up only the basket, leaving the rest behind. This is not a place for a full bushel. It is a place for the last scattered handfuls, the acorns that you might otherwise pass by, and your gatherer's instinct will not let them lie. You kneel on the moss, the cushion of it soft and dry under your knees, and you begin to pick up the acorns that are scattered here, a few under this tree, a few under that. The light is dimmer now. The details of the forest floor are harder to distinguish, and you must feel for the acorns as much as you see them. Your fingers brush through the leaves with a light, searching touch, and when they close around the familiar smooth shape, you lift it and drop it into the basket without looking. The sound the acorn makes is a small solitary tick, not the pattering rush of the great drifts under the oldest oak, but a single note, repeated again and again, as if the forest is speaking to you in a quieter voice now that the day is ending. The work is slower in the half-light, but it carries a particular satisfaction, a gentleness that matches the softening of the world around you. You move from tree to tree along the mossy rise, not following any plan or pattern, simply walking where the ground looks promising and stopping where it does not. The basket fills in small gradual increments, a handful now, a handful later, and you do not count the acorns or track the measure. You are gathering for the sake of gathering, because the season has taught you to do so, and because there is a quiet, wordless pleasure in the act itself. A robin watches you from a low branch of a hawthorn, its small body a dark silhouette against the pale sky, its bright eye catching the last of the light. It tilts its head, regards you for a moment, and then flits away, a soft whir of wings that fades quickly into the surrounding quiet. You watch it go and then return your eyes to the ground, your hand reaching out for another acorn, another small, cool, smooth shape. The robin's departure seems to mark a shift in the evening, a subtle deepening of the dusk, and you notice that the spaces between the trees are now fully shadowed, the trunks fading into a uniform grey that makes the wood seem larger and more mysterious than it did in the daylight. You find a hollow at the base of a young oak, a depression where the roots have pulled away from the soil, and it is filled with acorns that have rolled down the slight slope and collected there as if in a natural bowl. You scoop them out by the handful, the acorns cool and slightly damp from their sheltered resting place, and you add them to the basket with a soft, rapid patter. The hollow empties quickly, and you move on, your eyes scanning the dim ground for the next cluster, the next gathering point. The sound of the swineherd's horn reaches you from somewhere far off to the north, a low, breathy note that rises and falls and then fades into the evening. It is the signal that the pigs are being gathered for the night, called back from their scattered foraging to the enclosure, where they will sleep. You pause with your hand halfway to the basket and listen, and you hear, a moment later, the distant grunting and squealing of the herd as they respond to the call. The sounds are faint, carried on the still air, and they mingle with the rustle of leaves and the soft creaking of the branches overhead until you can no longer separate them. You know that the swineherd will be walking among them now, his crook guiding the stragglers, the sow with the bell leading the way. The pigs will settle into their night pen, full-bellied and heavy with mast, and the boy will sit beside a small fire, watching the stars appear. You are not part of that scene, but you can picture it clearly, and the picture is a comforting one, a sense of the forest's life continuing around you, even as you turn toward home. You straighten and stretch your back, the basket now perhaps a third full, and you look up through the branches at the sky. It has deepened from pale grey to a soft, dark blue, and the first stars are now fully visible, faint points of light scattered across the eastern horizon. A thin band of cloud hangs low in the west, touched with the last faint memory of the sunset. A pale orange line that is already fading. The air is cold enough now that you can feel it on your cheeks and the tips of your ears, and you know that the night will be a cool one, perhaps the first true chill of the autumn. You pull your tunic a little tighter, the wool warm and familiar, and you return to your gathering. The next tree visit is an old friend, a medium-sized oak that you passed in the morning on your way into the wood. You recognize the shape of its trunk, the way one branch grows out at an odd angle, the particular pattern of lichen on its bark. The ground beneath it is not thick with acorns, but they're enough to make the stop worthwhile. And you kneel in the familiar spot, your knees finding the same depression in the leaf litter where you knelt hours ago. The acorns here have been untouched since this morning, and they lie where they fell, scattered in a loose circle under the canopy. You gather them with the same patient rhythm you have used all day, your hands moving through the leaves, your fingers closing around the cool, hard shapes. The basket fills a little more. You are aware, as you work, that this is the last true gathering of the day. The light has faded to a point where you can barely distinguish the acorns from the leaves, and you are finding them now more by touch than by sight. Your fingers trained by a full day of work to recognize the smooth, pointed shape, the firm, solid weight. There will be no more bushels after this one, only the walk home and the slow settling into the evening's rest. The thought is not a sad one, nor is it a relief. It is simply a fact, the natural ending of the day's cycle, and you accept it without reaching for any other conclusion. When the basket is half full, you rise and walk back to the mossy hummock where you left the sack and the measure. The walk is short, but in the dim light it feels longer, the trees seeming to close in around you, the path less certain. You find the sack without difficulty, its rounded bulk a darker shape against the dark ground, and you set the basket beside it. The measure is there too, and you pick it up and place it on a level patch of moss, ready for the final pouring. You return to the trees with the basket, gathering a few more handfuls from the hollows and the drifts. And when the basket is full enough that the acorns threaten to spill, you carry it back and tip it into the measure. The sound is softer now, more muted, the acorns falling into the wooden box with a gentle rustling that does not carry far in the still, cold air. You level the pile with your forearm, a motion so practiced that it requires no thought, and the excess spills over the side onto the moss. You gather the fallen acorns and drop them back into the basket, then lift the measure and carry it to the sack. The sack's mouth opens under your hands, the cord loosened with a pull, and you tilt the measure and let the acorns slide inside. They tumble down into the darkness with a low, heavy sound, joining the great mass of mast that you have gathered since dawn. The sack is now noticeably full, its sides straining against the linen, the weight of it a solid, settled thing. You close the sack and tie the cord tightly, and then you stand still for a moment, your hands resting on the rough fabric, feeling the shape of the day's work beneath your palms. You take out the tally stick and the knife. The hazel rod is smooth and dark from handling, and you hold it up to the faint starlight, squinting to see the marks. 7 notches are already there, a neat row of V-shaped cuts, and you find an empty space beside the last and carve the 8th. The knife moves through the wood with a soft, whispering sound, and a tiny curl of hazel spirals away into the darkness. You blow on the notch, though there is no dust to see, and you run your thumb over the cut, feeling the slight roughness. 8 notches. 8 bushels. The tally stick is nearly full now, and you slip it back into your belt and return the knife to its sheath. The record is complete. You do not leave immediately. The evening has settled fully around you, the forest quiet and dark, and there is a stillness in the air that seems to ask for a moment of acknowledgement. You stand beside the mossy hummock, the sack heavy at your feet, the basket and the measure in your hands, and you look out into the dim wood. The trees stand as they have stood all day, silent and patient, their trunks fading into the deeper darkness. A faint breeze stirs the highest branches, a sound like a distant sigh, and then it dies, and the silence returns. You breathe in the cold, clean air, tasting the tannin and the damp earth, and you feel the pleasant tiredness of the long day settle into your bones. The walk back toward the cottage begins slowly, your steps careful on the dark path. You carry the basket in one hand and the measure under the other arm, and the sack you have slung across your back, its weight pulling gently at your shoulders. The path is the same one you followed this morning, but it feels different now. The darkness having transformed the familiar turns and dips into something softer, less defined. You walk by memory as much as by sight, your feet knowing the way even when your eyes cannot see it. The leaves crunch under your shoes, a quiet, steady rhythm, and your breath mists in the cold air, a small pale cloud that appears and vanishes. The forest is not silent, even in the darkness. Small sounds move through the undergrowth, the rustle of a mouse or a shrew, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft creak of a branch settling into the cold. These sounds are part of the night's fabric, and you listen to them without attending, your mind calm and empty. You are not thinking of the day behind you or the day ahead. You are simply walking, one step after another, the basket swinging gently, the sack pressing against your back, the path unrolling beneath your feet. You pass the holly thickets, their dark, glossy leaves catching the faint starlight. You pass the stand of beech, their pale trunks ghostly in the darkness. You pass the place where you first knelt this morning, under the young oak with the lichen-spotted bark, and you do not stop, but you notice it, a small landmark on the long, slow journey home. The forest begins to thin, the trees spacing out, and you can see ahead the open margin of the wood, the place where the path emerges from the canopy into the wide, dark field. The cottage appears at last, a small, dark shape against the darker sky, its chimney a thin black line. There is no light in the window, but the oiled linen covering catches the starlight faintly, a pale square in the wall. You walk the last stretch of path, your steps slowing now, and you set down the basket and the measure beside the door. The sack you lower from your shoulders, letting it rest against the wall, and you stand for a moment, breathing the cold night air, feeling the deep quiet of the hour. Inside the cottage, the fire has burned down to ash, and the air is cool but still holds the faint warmth of the morning's flames. You will rekindle it, and you will eat a simple meal, and you will wash your hands and face in the bucket of spring water by the door. But for now you stand in the darkness, the basket and the measure and the heavy sack all around you, and you listen to the silence. The day is over, the gathering is done, and the forest of Dean stands quiet under the October stars, waiting for the morning. You stand for a little while in the darkness outside the cottage door, letting the stillness of the evening settle around you. The basket and the bushel measure rest at your feet, their shapes barely visible in the faint starlight, and the sack of acorns leans against the stone wall, a heavy, rounded shadow that seems to breathe with the weight of the day's labor. The air is cold now, cold enough that you can feel it on the tips of your fingers and the rims of your ears, and your breath makes a soft, pale mist that drifts away into the night. Above you, the sky has cleared of its last cloud, and the stars are out in full, a scattering of bright points across the deep blue-black, with here and there the denser glitter of the Milky Way, like a road of frost stretching from horizon to horizon. You look up at them without thought, the way you have looked up at them on 1,000 other autumn nights, and then you bend to pick up the basket and the measure, pushing open the cottage door with your shoulder, and step inside. The interior of the cottage is dark and cool, the fire having died down to a pale mound of ash in the hearth. The single room smells of wood smoke and dry straw, and the faint, clean scent of the earth floor, a smell so familiar that it barely registers as a smell at all. Simply the air of home. You set the basket on its peg by the door, where it will wait for tomorrow, and you place the bushel measure on the floor beside it, the wood of the box still carrying the faint tannin scent of the acorns it has held. The tally stick you draw from your belt and lay on the narrow mantel shelf above the hearth, where it will be safe until the steward or his man comes to collect the record. The 8 notches are dark against the pale hazel, and you glance at them once, a brief acknowledgement of the day's work, before turning away. The sack of acorns remains outside, too heavy to bring in, and unnecessary by the hearth. It will stay by the door until morning, when the steward's cart will come to collect it, or you will carry it in smaller loads to the gathering point. You have done this many times before, and the thought does not occupy you. You close the cottage door, the wooden latch falling into place with a soft clunk, and then you cross to the hearth and kneel before the cold ashes. There is still a faint warmth deep in the ash, a memory of the morning's fire, and you blow gently on the grey surface until a few small embers glow orange in the darkness. You feed them with dry twigs from the pile beside the hearth, placing each one carefully so as not to smother the fragile heat. And when the twigs catch and begin to crackle, you add a split log, no thicker than your arm. The fire wakes slowly, a small flame licking up from the wood, and then it steadies and grows, filling the cottage with a soft flickering light that pushes the shadows back into the corners. The warmth begins to spread, touching your face and your hands, and you stay kneeling for a moment, letting the heat soak into your skin. You rise and go to the shelf where the loaf of rye bread still sits, wrapped in a clean cloth. You break off a piece, smaller than the piece you ate this morning, and you set it on the wooden board that serves as your table. From the cool corner by the door, you fetch a pot of pottage, a thick mixture of beans and leeks and a little barley that has been simmering slowly since yesterday, and now sits cold and congealed. You spoon some into a small iron pot and hang it on the trivet over the fire, pushing it close to the flames. The pottage will warm quickly, and while you wait, you take the bucket of spring water from its place by the door and dip your hands into it, washing away the day's accumulation of tannin and leaf mold. The water is cold, startlingly so, and you scrub your fingers and your palms and the backs of your hands, watching the dirt darken the water. When your hands are clean, you dry them on a rag of linen and then splash water onto your face, the cold bringing a brief sharp alertness that fades as quickly as it came. The pottage begins to bubble softly, a thick, savory smell rising from the pot, and you lift it from the trivet with a hooked stick and set it on the hearthstone to cool. You eat slowly, sitting on the low stool beside the fire, the wooden bowl warm in your hands. The pottage is thick and bland, the beans soft and the leeks reduced to a mild green flavor, and it fills your stomach with a gentle, spreading warmth. You eat the bread alongside it, tearing off small pieces and dipping them into the broth, chewing slowly, your jaw moving in the same unhurried rhythm with which you gathered acorns all day. There is no rush to finish. The night is long and the cottage is quiet, and the meal is simply another part of the day's slow closing. When the bowl is empty, you set it aside and drink a cup of water from the bucket, the liquid cool and clean, washing away the last taste of the pottage. You bank the fire carefully, pushing the embers together and covering them with a thick layer of ash so that they will keep until morning without burning through the night. The light in the cottage dims to a soft red glow, and the shadows return, gentler now, filling the corners with a warm darkness. You rise from the stool and stretch, your arms reaching upward, your back arching, and you feel the pleasant tiredness that has settled into every part of you. Your shoulders ache faintly from the weight of the sack, your knees remember the hours of kneeling, and your hands are slightly stiff from the constant gripping and releasing of the acorns. It is the tiredness of a day fully lived, a tiredness that asks for nothing but rest, and you welcome it. You cross to the straw pallet that lies against the far wall, a simple bed of woven rushes covered with a rough wool blanket. You sit down on the edge of it, the straw rustling beneath you, and you remove your shoes, setting them side by side on the floor. The leather is damp from the forest floor, and you make a note to dry them by the fire in the morning, a small automatic thought that barely forms before it fades. You lie down, stretching out on the pallet, and pull the wool blanket up to your chin. The straw is prickly in places, but mostly soft, shaped by your body over many nights, and it holds you in a familiar embrace. You turn onto your side, facing the hearth, and you let your eyes rest on the faint red glow of the banked embers. The cottage is silent now, but it is a living silence full of small, comfortable sounds. The fire makes a soft, settling noise, a tiny crack and hiss as the last of the wood gives way to ash. A beam in the roof creaks once, the wood cooling in the night air, and then is still. Outside, the forest continues its nocturnal life, and you can hear it through the oiled linen window and the gaps in the door, the distant hoot of a tawny owl, a long, wavering note that repeats twice and then fades, and the fainter answer from another owl deeper in the wood. A fox barks somewhere far off, a sharp, single cry that does not repeat. The stream, which you can no longer see but can still hear, makes its steady, liquid murmur, a sound so continuous that it becomes a kind of silence itself, a soft, watery hush beneath all the other noises. You lie still, your breathing slowing, and you let your mind drift across the day's quiet landscape. You do not recount the bushels or the notches or the trees, you simply let the images rise and fall, the way the leaves fell from the branches. The great old oak with its massive, spreading canopy and its carpet of glossy acorns, the sow with her bell and her tumbling piglets, the steward's tired, kindly face and his small wax tablet, the feel of the cool acorns in your palm, the sound of them pouring into the measure, the soft cushioned thud of the swineherd's horn. These images pass through you without effort, and you do not hold on to any of them. They are simply there, and then they are gone, and your mind grows quieter with each passing moment. The warmth of the blanket and the banked fire spreads through your limbs, loosening the last of the day's tension. Your shoulders relax into the straw, your hands uncurl, your breathing becomes deep and even. The tiredness that was a pleasant ache now becomes a soft, heavy weight, pressing you gently into the pallet, and you feel the boundary between waking and sleeping begin to blur. The sounds of the cottage and the forest merge into a single, low hum, a continuous note that holds you in its center, and you are aware in a distant, drifting way that you are falling asleep. Outside, in the forest of Dean, the night has fully settled. The trees stand motionless under the October stars, their bare branches etched against the sky, and the leaf litter on the forest floor is cold and damp and silent. The acorns that you did not gather lie where they fell, scattered under the oaks and the beeches, their glossy shells dim in the starlight. Some will be found by the pigs in the morning, crunched between strong jaws and turned into fat and flesh. Some will be gathered by other hands, other baskets, other tally sticks. Some will lie undisturbed until the frost splits them open or the rain softens them, and they will send down small, pale roots into the dark soil, beginning the long, slow process of becoming trees themselves. The cycle of the mast goes on, as it has gone on for centuries, and your part in it is both small and essential, a single thread in the great, quiet tapestry of the wood. Near the forest's edge, in the swineherd's enclosure, the pigs lie huddled together for warmth. The sow with the bell is at the center, her great body a mound of dark warmth, and the piglets are pressed against her sides, their breathing soft and rapid. The other pigs are scattered around them, the boar with the torn ear sleeping with his head on his forelegs, the reddish-brown sow curled into a tight ball. Their bellies are full of acorns and beech mast, and they sleep the deep, contented sleep of animals that have eaten well and found shelter. The swineherd sits nearby on a log, a small fire burning at his feet, his crook leaning against his knee. He is half asleep himself, his eyes heavy, and he watches the stars wheel slowly overhead, counting the hours by their movement until the next watch begins. The moon has not yet risen, but it will later, a pale crescent that will climb above the eastern hills and cast a thin, silver light over the forest. When it does, The acorns that are still falling will catch that light for a brief moment as they drop from the high branches, spinning through the cold air, and they will land with a soft, cushioned thud on the leaf litter, one by one, the quiet metronome of the season. The badgers will emerge from their set under the ancient beech, their striped faces moving through the undergrowth, and the foxes will slit through the shadows on silent feet, and the owls will call back and forth across the dark canopy. But for now, in this moment, the forest is still, and you are asleep. Your breathing is slow and regular, your face relaxed, your hands resting loosely on the blanket. The fire's red glow has faded to a dim, pulsing ember, and the cottage is dark except for the faint starlight that filters through the window. You do not dream, or if you do, the dreams are too quiet to remember, mere wisps of sensation that pass through your sleeping mind like cloud shadows over a field. The day's work is done, and tomorrow you will rise and do it again, gathering the acorns that have fallen during the night, adding to the tally, filling the sack. The pannage season will continue through the rest of October and into November, and you will be there for all of it, a steady, quiet presence in the forest, part of its rhythm, part of its ancient repeating story. But that is tomorrow. Tonight there is only the sleep, deep and restful, and the cottage, and the banked fire, and the silent, waiting wood. The stars turn slowly overhead, marking the hours in their unhurried way, and the earth cools beneath them. The stream slides over its stones, the pigs snuffle softly in their sleep, and the acorns continue their slow fall from the high branches, a small ceaseless rain that will go on until the oaks are bare. You sleep through it all, unaware and at peace, held in the quiet heart of the October night, and the forest holds you in its turn, a gatherer resting after a long day's gentle labor, waiting for the first grey light of dawn to call you back to the mast.